right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the IEEE Senior Member and Fellow Elevations webinar hosted by Industry Engagement Committee. I'm also thankful for Don Tan, IEEE Fellow Advisory Chair and Oversight Subcommittee for the year 2024-2025 Chair, and also he is the Vice Chair of the IEEE Industry and Engagement Committee for the years 2025. Without further ado, I will hand over the presentation to you, Don, and thank you very much again, and enjoy.
Thank you, Amber. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, just wherever you are. It's my great pleasure to share some basic information on the elevation of IEEE senior members and fellows. So let me see, how do I? So first, I'm a long-term IEEE volunteer, and then served on various different positions within IEEE, from the chapter chair to the conference committee chair, to society president, EIC standards, Google Little Box Challenge. And now I'm actually vice president elect for technical activities. I work for a US Fortune 500 company, and served to the executive levels. So it's been a great pleasure to share my thoughts on this. Let's start. I have organized my talk in the following sections. First, we'll talk about the fellow senior membership, the grades, and then there's a minimum qualification that's required when you submit your application or nomination in order to get through the system. So the minimum requirements. And then you need how do we prepare yourself, and then how do we then want you to know. Judging yourself, then how do we say, hey, do I have a chance, or am I qualified? Then we'll talk about the nomination package, which is very important, since that's the only thing that you have going for you, communicating your case with various different committees. Then we'll talk about stats for class 2025. As we all know, 2026 just announced. We don't have a detailed stats, but we have a top-level summary, but can give you a good feel. And then as appendix, I can tell you the resources online to help you to navigate the maze. So first of all, the IEEE senior members is at the highest grade that a member can apply to. So in other words, you can apply to. You don't have to be nominated. It requires 10 years of professional experience, including graduate study years. So that's the difference between this and fellow. And then 5 years of significant performance over the 10 years. So then, and that then requires 3 references if you apply, or 2 references if you are nominated by a senior member. Basically, so a total of 3 senior members. There's no limit how many times you can apply, and then also no limit on how many can be elevated within a year. So that's actually significantly different than the fellow. And then another important thing is that the elevations are done on the rolling waves within a year. So in other words, I think typically at least 3 waves. Sometimes we have even 4, 5, or 6 waves, depends on the application that we receive. So there's a senior member portal. You can click this link, or you can search on the website. You can see that there's a lot of detailed information. So as we mentioned, that the qualification is actually articulated in the IEEE bylaws. That's the highest level of governing documents for the IEEE operations. And then basically it's what I just said. So the benefits, needless to say that there's many, and then I'm just quickly going through them. First of all, is the really a high level of professional recognition. So once you elevate it, you will get a senior member plaque. Then announcement can be made to the society's portals, or you can and then letter accommodations can be sent to your employees, employer, or your fellow employees, if you so desire, if you provide the contact information. And also the benefits to IEEE society councils, they can get additional coupons. The leadership eligibility, there's a senior members are eligible to hold executive IEEE warranty positions. As you will realize, many of the executive positions requires a minimum senior membership. So that's actually very important to bear in mind if you do a lot of work for a volunteer, which we certainly appreciate. Then you need to know that you need to be a senior member to be eligible. Of course, then you can actually ability to refer other candidates, write references for them as an additional service to the society. So the benefits to the organization, relatively speaking, is also many. So like I mentioned, that many executives officers require a senior membership. So then if you are a senior member, then you are eligible. Then we have one more potential volunteers for leaderships. The percentage and the number of IEEE senior members reflects the competence and the prestige and the society provides and products and services. That's basically a peer recognition. As you all know, vigorous, review, the peer recognition is the highest form of recognition that you can get within a professional organization. A greater percentage of senior members belongs to IEEE technical society and councils. Since I'm actually VP technical activities, I would encourage you to join the technical societies and councils to really get involved with a specific field. That's your specialization. And also senior members volunteer at a higher percentage rate than do other grades of IEEE members. And then there's some rebate, additional money to go to your section if you're a senior member to help your local activities. So that's for the senior member, okay? Generally speaking, genetically, all these benefits actually apply to IEEE fellows, which then lead us to the fellow discussion. The IEEE fellows, as we all know, is highly prestigious. This is the highest form of peer recognition of your technical skills and the maturity. So every year, their total number of elevation each year is less than 0.1% of the total high-grade members. So in other words, it is done once in a year, and also there's a limit how many you can we can be elevated within a year. It's a 0.1%. In the past 3 years, that number is actually actualizing about 330-ish. So this is the highest membership that the board of directors confers to a member. So remember, this is confirmed by the board of directors. Recognize significant impact to the society at large, which I'll come back to this next chart. Requires 10 to 15 years of professional experiences, excluding graduate studies. This is different than the senior member. For you to count 10 or 15 years, your graduate studies does not count because we're judging you on your own, not when you work with your professors, with your advisor. So that's why the graduate studies actually excluded. And then for membership-wise, 5 years of accumulated IEEE membership in any grade. So this is pretty relatively easy, and you can see that's done for a particular reason. To basically to allow people to get the access to the fellow for the high-flying individuals within the industry. And you can, each one of them can have up to 5 references and 3 endorsements. Then we'll talk a little bit more in your package nomination pack. No limits on how many times you can be nominated. So I mentioned before, the elevation is done a year, once a year. So typically an announcement is made after the November board series, where the board reviews and approves the final recommendations by the fellow committee. There's a portal for fellows there too, so you can click that, or you can search on the internet, get you there. So the same way is defined in the Constitution, the IEEE bylaws, the highest governing documents. So as you all know, the IEEE fellows, crown jewels IEEE, and then it's highly seek, after by many people, particularly people in the academia world. It's highly respected because we have rigorous vetting process to guarantee to ensure the quality and prestige. So just want to mention two things to you. Recently, as you know, this is the fourth year we actually implemented a board edict evaluation process. So relative to qualification, we added two things. One is we added at large, as I highlighted by the circle on the screen, uh, basically a realization of a significant value to society at large. The reason for that two words basically emphasize to the society at large, not a particular technical society. In other words, more bluntly, is basically not directly means how many papers we publish. We want you to impact the society, impact the industry, impact the products, impact the systems, impact the algorithms, the processes, the products and services you provide. Basically, make a difference to daily life to us. That's one thing we recently enhanced. The other one is that the 15 years of professional experience, because then we require certain maturity in your field, and then in the past that's what is not in there. So we want to discourage some unhealthy competition when you're really young. You're trying to compete to become IEEE fellow. So that's not, the behaviors we would like to encourage. We want to encourage people to excel in your field, to focus on the make impact to the society, to enhance our overall IEEE impact to the society. So that you can see the punchline is the advancing technology for the humanity. So that's the two things that we recently enhanced. You should bear in mind. So then you will ask, okay, so that's these are the minimum qualifications you need to have before you your nominator can submit your nomination package on the system. Otherwise, the system will check it and they will you will not pass. So you need a minimum the requirement. The same is true for the senior members. For the senior members, there's a more detailed, nuanced details on how you calculate the 10 years of professional life. And then you should look on the website or contact staff if you have questions. So the so the another thing I want to mention is that you can see as I presented, the senior members and the fellows, they have a different emphasis on the qualification. So then, as mentioned, you should digest that. So now, once you understand you meet the minimum requirements, then you then say, how do I qualify? First one is you should have a plan. Then of course, if you should set up a goal early, particularly when we have a young professionals here, then you should set up a start early. And then you can prepare for it. Focus on impact to society at large. Develop impactful products, algorithms, processes, and the systems, and etc. Pay attention to publications if you're in the academia world. File patent applications. Write internal IRAD, independent research and development, and external project reports. These are the important things you need to do, be conscious about. Basically, it's a documentation, your accomplishment with a concrete and valuable, verifiable documentation, and also make sure your peers knows what you have done. Building a relationship, I would encourage you participate in local chapter meetings, local technical activities, and global conferences. That's where you can build a relationship and also understand how IEEE operates. As you all know, IEEE this year we broke the records. We reached the 500,000 members. That's historical high. And then it's a big organization, and you need to spend some time to understand IEEE. We do our best to minimize reduce the bureaucracy, but for a large organization, there are certain amount of them that you need to understand. So that can help you. Particularly, I would encourage you to find an IEEE mentor. If you do not have one already, a mentor can help to understand how IEEE operates globally and locally. Serve as a sounding board to bounce off your idea and thoughts. Has the potential to be a nominator or even a reference writer for you. And then, of course, if you can, even you can find an IEEE sponsor. That's a one step further. Basically, this particular person can advocate on your behalf for opportunities to volunteer and can critique your thoughts and qualification, right? So one thing I'd like to, at the work at our company, I run a multiple sponsor mentoring programs. And then one lesson we learned is that the mentor and the sponsoring relationship cannot be forced. So you need to actually build it naturally, because both sides needs to be comfortable to share the real thoughts. Otherwise, the mentoring or even sponsoring is not going to really happen. It's just a formality. So you need to build that relationship naturally. And then, so the best way to get in this relationship going is to join one or more technical societies, and then you get to know people, and then naturally you have people you feel comfortable to talk with, and then you can go from there. So then how the continue in preparing yourself. How do you? One of the questions that I got really frequently is, as Don, how do I find the reference? Right. I mean, yeah, for some, there are some difficulties, particularly in a region where you do not have too many references. HOB fellows or seniors is relatively straightforward. So the three ways for you to find a potential fellow reference writer. First one is to search IEEE fellow directory online. It's on the IEEE fellow portal. And then second one is ask your local chapter society or even adjacent society for help. And then of course, then you need to join the society if you're not already. So currently, actually, fellow committee, also board of directors, is actually mandating each society and council to form a fellow nomination committee. So fellow nomination committee in parallel to a search committee. So the search committee, basically the job is to help people to identify potential candidates, and then also to help people with references and endorsements to basically, and also provide some guidance on how to write your nomination package with your nominators. The endorsement writers is the same as basically typically, I will talk about it a little bit more later. It's basically the people who knows you really well. And they don't have to be IEEE member. For references, they have to be IEEE fellow. But for endorsements, they don't have to be fellow, not even IEEE member. So these are excellent resources for you to go after to provide additional information to support your nomination package. So then once you prepare it, you think you are, based on you hearing what I said today, you feel like you have a chance, and then you would like to pursue. And then the question is, how do I judge myself? Do I have a chance? Am I qualified? So first of all, there's no cut and dry rules as to effectively judging oneself for fellow evaluate qualification. As you all know, it's like any awards, there's no clear cut and dry formulas. Then that's why the fellow committee, the various committees are for. They judge you either you're qualified or not. Then you, of course, I mentioned that 15 years of professional experience. And also one thing you need to bear in mind, I put it in the parentheses, is this is not necessarily a life achievement award. Even though some people regard this as a lifetime recognition, which is actually for many people is true. So that's why people sometimes confuse. But technically it's not an award. It's actually a member grade. So that's very important for you to bear in mind. And that's actually one of the reasons, strong reasons we have not put any limitation on how many times you can be nominated for or apply for senior members. So, and then, but however, I've been sharing these rules based on the feedbacks. People kind of like this, so I'm keeping saying this. So I have actually developed my own rules to just basically trying to help. Um, basically, to ask yourself if you have one or two or even three technical contributions in your particular technical field that can be roughly ranked in the top 10% by your peers. So there's a two or three things in your particular technical field. It doesn't have to be a broader, say, power electronics or power systems. It can be a specific, for instance, machine control, motor drives, microgrids, or power compensation in a particular field that renewable integration, for instance, that you can, and then, but the key is you have to judge, subjectively, potentially, because it has to be judged by your peers. So you need to ask your friends, say, hey, what do you think? I think that probably. I say the rough order of magnitude estimate are as follows. Typically, as I mentioned before, every 0.1%, typically professional life, just say 30 years, and then that's 3%. And then in the recent years, the elevation rate is typically 3 to 1. So that gives you 9%. So I'm just using 10% as a round number. So it's easy to remember. So that's how I derive this, give you some concrete things that you can feel when you across the river, so to speak. So you can, even though there's no, official rules, okay? So hopefully they can be helpful for you. So that's what I just said. Another thing I would actually encourage you to do is that to read the sample profiles. The fellow committee developed a 4 sample profiles as outlined in here for application engineer practitioners. This one has been recently upgraded to technical innovators because application engineer sometimes is too narrow to really application engineers. Those actually answer questions from customers. That's not actually what people do in the industry. So we recently changed the name to technical innovators. And then the educators, research engineer, scientists, technical leaders. And then recently we add one more standards contributions. That's one of the improvements. So you can read those are very useful. So let me give you one. This is one from industry. This sample is written by Steve Wozniak. And then I'm not expecting everybody from industry to be Steve Wozniak, but I nevertheless give you a very nice reference, saying what's been how to write a good nomination package. So the another thing after that, as writing is important. I would encourage you start early, especially if you are not a native English speaker. Then you need to start early, even earlier, and then try to find somebody to. Of course, these days you can use AI tools to help you, but you have to remember you cannot use AI tools to generate a nomination package. Anyway, so now, and after that, I'm writing the preparation. Then another thing is important for you to realize the so-called the contribution characterization matrix. So this is one thing in the 4 years ago, 4 years ago, I actually led the fellow committee really revamp the matrix. Let me show you. Basically, you can see, I will show you the 3 screenshots. On the left hand, on the rows, you can see research engineer, scientists, technical innovators. In the past, there's only one qualification, which basically is in where my arrow is, basically the first qualification column and the first row, research engineer and scientist. Basically, all we look at is papers and how many papers. So it basically that works for the academics, right? That's what they go after. Even though the most recent trend is even walk away from that because they're just being abused by many people. And then also it's not a real inflection on the particular person's capability. So, but that's a different topic. But what we did is extend this thing now, expand to from 1 by 1 matrix to the currently 5 by 5 matrix. Now the contributions, now you have research publications, peer-reviewed materials that includes your internal R&D reports, designs, products, processes, algorithms, systems, and you can see we explicitly called out this is what people in the industry do. So we recognize the contribution, and then this basically direct impact to society as we live. And of course, patent traits and the standards. So you can see and then we also colored the roles for the researchers and the scientists, researchers, scientists. The most important is the green one. The second important is the yellow one. The least important are the white ones. So you can see for the researchers and scientists, and of course the publication important, peer-reviewed materials, patents they do. But from technical leaders, they don't write papers. They don't even do any technical reports. They focus on the designs of products, patents, and then sometimes they do some standards. And then for technical innovator from industry, I'm sorry, I misspoke. You can see industry people is focused on the two green areas here. And then for technical leaders, they're similarly in here. And then educators, they focus more on peer-reviewed materials. They don't necessarily publish as many papers. They do patents, and then of course sometimes they really do standards. Of course, no design, the products, etc. And then most recently, and you can see we introduced the board of directors introduced a new category called standards contributions. Then you can see the most important for them is the far right. The green is on far right on standards. So you need to read this to really understand for each category, what qualifications specifically called out for. And then after that you pick, then you need to within your nomination package you either select two out of 5 contribution categories. You can pick 2. The 2 of them can be the same or they can be different. So this basically broaden the actually more reflective on what's going on the real world in the trenches, because now nobody is really working exclusively in a particular narrow field as we define them. So they all across the broader field. So then it's important for you to really understand, to write a good nomination package to help your endorser, nominators, because then it's reviewed by 3 or 4 separate process or separate committees. First, your fellow grade reference or endorsers, they would like to read your nomination form to understand what your nominator thinks, your qualifications are. And then the society and the council fellow evaluation committee, normally called FECs. And then for smaller society and councils, then there's another delta step called a cohorts fellow evaluation committee, CFAC. CFAC is basically created, as I note in the different color in the bottom, to address the issue of the smaller society and a smaller pool of candidates, because they sometimes have 0, 1 or 2 nominees, and then how do we put them together within the 47, 49, 48 society councils? So they form a cohort so they can get about 10 or 15 of them. And then finally, the IEEE fellow committee member. So you can see it can be 3 or 4 evaluation levels by the committee members. So it's important, your nomination package and the references and endorsements, these are the only things you can communicate with the committee. So you need to put your best efforts in there. So when you write this thing, you need to make sure there are 2 folds. It's a kind of challenging. It has to be written in such a way the experts in your field understand your contributions are. That's one requirement. Of course, then you naturally would think of that. Second one is you need to write in such a simple way as somebody as a generalist in engineering, in adjacent field, can really appreciate your contribution also. So that's a delicate balance. You have to be, because like I mentioned before, there are 3 or 4 different societies, and not all of them are your specialists in your field. So you need to write a specialty enough for your people, specialists to evaluate your contribution, to recognize you, and also for generalists in the other different committees. So that's the balance. So that's why I encourage you to start early. So basically, here, then basically, I almost say there are 3 elements, and you can see the form is written such a way. Basically, you say what your contributions are. Secondly, you say whether you find your evidence of contributions, and then, second one, you say your impact. For instance, this technology is being used by my company, which generated $100 million in sales, or some big company use my technology to do things A, B, and C, and D, right? And then third, you tell them where do you find the evidence to support that. As simple as that. Let's just go directly into that. Then that will be best, most effective way. Concise narratives, and then explicit address this. That's preferred. And excessive superlatives will reduce your reference effectiveness. I can see you don't want to use adjectives on top of adjectives on top of adjectives. That's a lot of people just naturally do. That's not effective. So you just need to go to the bottom line. It's just a simple, concise language. Say this person contributes A, B, and C, and the impact is such and such, and then here's where to find the evidence. That's as simple as that. And then also I want to talk a little bit more about references and endorsements. This also is a really important package of your nomination, part of your package, nomination package. So you can write up to 5 references, but all the references has to be written by an IEEE fellow. The job of this reference is to judging if you are qualified to be IEEE fellow. So apparently, needless to say, they need to be a fellow to make that judgment. But the minimum requirements are 3, the maximum is 5. So I would encourage you to do 5. The reason is very simple. It's not I prefer. It's overwhelming majority of people do 5. So you don't want to put yourself in that sense in a disadvantage. And then also the references are highly influential for society and council fellow evaluation committees, and also for CFACs, and also for the fellow committee. So your society level, council level evaluation is very important. So you should write that because they know your work, because they are the specialists. Overall, at the IEEE level, your society is your specialist, of course, and then within society, you have subdivides, of course. So when you write nominators, you can work with your nominator. You can finally, it has to be written by a nominator, the nomination form. You should work with your nominator and to make sure he or she feels comfortable and knows your contribution. Provide all the raw materials he or she can write, help you to write help write in the nomination package. And then but however, the final say is the nominator. Then there's some more details for you to reference if you want to go look them. And then let me go back to here. Generally speaking, we will not. You would rather not to use many people in your same institution or same company to write a reference. Maybe you can use one, which I will write next page. But we prefer. We actually we have seen 3 out of 5 references written by the same department of professors. As you can see, that certainly will reduce your effectiveness. I mean, there's nothing exclude your package, but certainly reduce your effectiveness. You should actually go outside your institution or your company or your research agency or government agency to find somebody else. And also different, particularly even different regions to build up your credibility. So that's the reference. But for the endorsements, I mentioned this before. Endorsements is a very important tool for people to use. There are people actually they didn't provide endorsements because endorsements are optional. But my recommendation for you is to fully leverage this tool to provide the particular information. First of all, like I mentioned before, the endorser doesn't even have to be HB member, not to mention a fellow. Uh, so the particular use for in the three scenarios. One is that if you work for a company from industry, when your contribution is written, right, when the contribution is made, and then at that time, and your company may not want you to publish anything on that particular technology because the products are being developed, the chips are being sold, the systems are being developed. They don't want to, but a few years later, and then one day your technology has made a difference, made a lot of impact to the company's bottom line, then you can write. And then this is the best place for you to write, potentially proprietary information, but maybe the company may be actually more open for you to write about it. So that's one. So the person in your company who knows you well will be the perfect person to write your endorsement letter. It doesn't have to be actually a member. So that's one thing. Second one, similarly, if you do work for classified, you do classified work, you know how difficult it is. And then you need to find somebody within your institution, your company, or your agency to write a non-classified version of it. And then that person is to somebody who knows you well, right? Then it has to be from the same organization. The third scenario is that if you actually go out for EDU, education category, here is more important. So for instance, you develop a textbook, and which initially your own department professor they all use them, or your friends use them, and then it propagates to other institutions across the globe. People like your text and they use your text, and that's the influence, that's the impact to the education, right? And then there's this but or you have a lab course, a lab menu, a lab course, particularly well, developed, and then people like them. And then that can be a contribution to education, workforce students and the workforce development. And then the best person to do that work is somebody in your chain of command. Maybe your department chair, your deans, or within your lab, lab directors, etc. So for the endorsement, for the reference, we encourage you don't use too many of your people from your organization for the endorsement. This you should use of course, you have to use your, people from your same organization. So that's the about it. So that's basically that's the emphasis of your package. And of course, there's more details. If you go search online, you can find them. Let's see. Okay, so that's basically the gist of it, and then I can answer some specific questions. Here is the class of 2026. This really initial preliminary data that you can see. I'd like to point out a couple of things. You can see the standards. They recommended 20. The nomination is 48. This is a significant increase from 4 or 5 years ago when the board actually asked us to revamp the evaluation process, like I outlined, I discussed before. We added this. This is a new category, so we see a significant, because we all know the standards makes big difference for industry, and for government. Also, for instance, the power grids. You have to have standards to connect them together. Otherwise, you'll cause stability problems. You'll get calls from the governors or the city mayors if you have problems. You don't want to be there, right? And then also another one I don't mention is industry, and then we now have 179 nominations, get a 59, and then we also made progress in region 9. You can see that 20, then we're out of 3. Then you will see they are still only 15%. So this is a traditional historical issue that we've been working. A couple of years ago, there was 0 elevation from region 9, and in the past is 1 or 2. This year we made a difference. We made 3. So in other words, the recent revamp, and then also the traditional region 1 through 7 under here where my arrow is still strong. Region 10 is strong. Region 8 is strong. That's this basically traditional part, and that's where the uh, technologies are more developed. And so you can see, so we're waiting for the, the fellow staff to publish detailed for 2026. So this is 25. I'm going to go back to 25 because it's not available yet. So you can see for education, you can see it's basically consistently um, in the couple hundreds, and then industry in here. That's 2025. This year, for class of 2025, we had 10,000, about 1,000 nominations. This year, the federal committee evaluated about 1,200, more than I think it's 1,268. That's a lot. So you can see we're getting people's attention. Hopefully, I've been doing this kind of seminars for a while to encourage people to consider IEEE fellow to provide engagement to our members, and more importantly, to provide support to our members' career development. And also a total elevation 336. That's where one third is coming from. For women elevation, that's in here. For regions, you can see that we are continuing that trend. And then we also have details for each society. So this for industry application, industry electronics, power electronics. So these are our sister societies. And then power energy and the power electronics. They are basically all doing strong society-wise. And then there are a couple of things you can search online. I mentioned online resources. Then I would encourage you to go online there. This web page has been revamped because the new process we've been implementing. But you go there, but the portal is the same. Then the basic information is there. And then also, if you do standards, the Standards Association have a FELCO, the Fellow Committee. They are not evaluate fellows. It's basically nomination committee in a sense, not nomination, search committee. They help people to find the people qualified for standards contributions, and also for help them to navigate the process. So with that, that concludes my talk, and then I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dunn. That's definitely a very insightful presentation. And I think the number one question, will you share the slides with us? I see this question in the chat. Yes, we'll have the presentation available and also the recording, and it will be posted on IEEE TV channel for Industry Engagement Committee. And we had a couple questions here in the chat, so I'll start from the first question by Dodi. On page 13, he said, can I ask other IEEE member or senior member to become my references or endorsements for me to apply for IEEE fellow? He mentions that he's currently a senior member for more than 15 years of working experience.
What do you mean by other members? Yes, of course you can ask. What do you mean other members?
Other IEEE member. Can his references and endorsement be IEEE members or senior members, like professional member or senior member?
Oh, okay. So the reference has to be fellow. The only exception that we made is actually the Region 9, because the problem I just described, because historically Region 9 has very few fellows except Brazil. Brazil have a healthy amount. But overall, that on average is very few fellows. So we are actually working, help them develop. Region 9, you can use a senior member to do that work. Otherwise, you have to be a fellow. But the fellow committee is working the process to extend that exceptions. For instance, in Africa and also parts of Region 10, where the fellows are very few. Yeah, so we are working on that. The fellow committee is working on that.
Okay. Another question from Hani. Does 15 years of professional experience include graduate studies like master or PhD?
For senior members, it does. A little bit confusing. For fellows, it does not.
Mm.
Okay. So the reason for fellows is simply because fellows your own recognition. So we should not include your work with your supervisors, and basically you should stand on your own. So the basic idea is very simple. It's basically just there are always exceptions. If you are a high school graduate, you start working and you are exceptionally good. You can actually 15 years that will take you. When you are 35, you can apply. But most people, overwhelming majority, say you have a PhD, say I just say 30 years. When you get your PhD in typically in about 30, and you basically in the middle 40s, then you can you basically qualified. Um, and then in the 50s, you can apply for all kinds of awards recognition. Then in mid 50s or 60s, you can go for academia recommendation, highest level recommendation for professional engineers. Well, this is for typical. Of course, there are always exceptions. The juniors, they can. We have exceptions for juniors. That's why you can see our qualification is written in a particular way, basically allow a genius to go through the process without, yeah. The expressions can be made, but this all the rules are for overwhelming majority regular people like me, regular people. Okay.
Okay. Another question from Dave DeRocher. For fellows nomination, is it better to have contributions in two different categories, or is it better to stick with one?
Well, that's hey Dave, that's a tricky question. Actually, I would say it depends on your basically your own qualification, the nominee's qualification. I would say if you say you can do either, right, based on your qualification, I would say for two separate categories probably helps. I don't know. Yeah, that if you ask me, personal opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, and he has a follow-up on, will you explain the difference between a Society Fellows Committee and IEEE Fellows Committee, and which is more important in a candidate being elevated?
The difference, okay, so the difference is basically, especially with the new revamp, we are currently in the process trying to unify the fellow society council FECs, because as you say, the challenge there is the larger societies like computer, ComSoc, and PS, they nominate 100 plus people. I mean, no, yeah, each year the nominees they receive nominations in hundreds. The small society they get in one or two or three or four or five, and the mid-sized societies like David IAS typically gets about 30-ish, like PALS IES. So that's we need so that's why we have created CFAX basically for small society. Maybe we put 10 of them together, you get about 30 roughly. That's the idea. And then we can put them together with almost equal weight. So that's more give you a better chance, right? Otherwise, we have difficulty to put them together. The specifically for society council evaluation is basically focus on your technical contribution in a particular field, because like I said, relative to the federal committee at the IEEE level, the society council is basically a specialist, because we don't, I mean, I'm sitting in a fellow, we have 37, 38 society, 48 society councils. Yeah, they are vastly different, but however, I can say this guy's good enough. One, particularly with the society council evaluation. So it's very important for society and council to do an excellent job to evaluate the real technical contribution of each candidates nominees. Um, so technically speaking, they're doing the same thing, but I think the more focus, society and council more focused on technical aspects to really write specifics on the to really judge the basically you tell us these people actually is in your top 10% or not, if you, in my terminology. We can't really write any menus that way, but I just, if you, in my term, just basically, are these people really in the 10%, or how many of them are in the 10%? And then your society agrees. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. Another question from Ali. If you have a startup company which is spun off the university and you are still CEO of the company, how can you include that contribution?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. In the past couple of years, the federal committee, once we implement the new system, I use the word new system loosely. It's actually basically the same system, but we just refined the evaluation process. So I just use the term loosely. The new system, then remember now you can, a lot of people actually go to industry, but now we actually realized that problem. So we will encourage people, you should pick the predominant affiliation. For instance, you spend 70, 60, or 70% time in the university and 30% of your time at your startup. And then you should be classify yourself as academia or educational institution, not an industry. But then in the contribution, then you, like Dave asked, you say, hey, then you definitely need to pick education where you actually emphasize your educational contribution. And then you put the industry there, say, hey, I studied a company, the company is doing extremely well. I'm getting $100 million, funding from agency or from the venture capitalist, whatever. Yeah. So that's basically, that's actually the reason we put the two contributions there, and then also allow the contribution to crisscross each other. So that way, actually, as we all know, actually, industry people, good industry people, they do research too, vice versa. Professors, they do a lot of, startups, they do a lot of, companies too. But they should use a predominant major, basically a predominant occupation.
I see. All right. I think we have one last question from Ramachandra. He says, how can I present my 20 years of business consulting in supply chain and digital transformation experience for follow application? And what are the approval chances with IEEE volunteer activities to showcase?
Let's see, the first part on, I didn't quite get the second part. Let's just say, second part is say, can you read it one more time?
Yeah, he said, how does he present his 20 years experience of business consulting in supply chain and digital transformation for follow application?
Oh, yeah. So this one, I think if you supply chain is really important for industry. Then, for instance, if you made a impact in your, for instance, you improve your company or multiple companies' bottom lines, I would say you should write those up. Yeah, I certainly understand that can be if it's a little bit more evolved, because it's not like a paper. It's hey, I published this paper. It's a product. It's a my technology goes into these products, and then this product made the company hundreds or billions of dollars. You should go the same route. Say hey, I actually support my methodology. I help this company develop this product with my supply chain, reduce the cost by this much, inventory by this much, it shortened the onboarding process. And you know what the keywords you can put in there. That I would say that probably I would say that's probably the way you can write it up. Say, hey, then my impact is actually indirectly reflected in this product. For instance, you say, hey, I reduce the production cost by 1/3 or whatever, right? You can, because I have better supply chain management, etc. I hope that helps. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not everything. Yeah, it's not easy because everybody's case is
yeah, it's
different.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely that's helpful. I think one last question, and it's common question that we received in the chat. For people who don't have nominators and they don't know where to start, does the IEEE Follow Committee has resources to help connect them with nominators?
We've been, yeah, I would say there's no direct help. In other words, in the sense that we do not have a particular staff to dedicate to work that, but we do have staff. Um, but I don't. But I would think you should, if you have a good chance, you should go to, like I said before, I would say go to you search your fellow website. You find that the people are local to you or in the adjacent area, or through your friends. Then you should attend the local chapter meetings, which you can do, right? And get on the calendar, because the local chapter meetings usually a much smaller group. I would say 10 or 15, 20, 30 people. It's a very small group. And then you can talk to people. If you go there a few times, then you pretty soon you will build a relationship. Then you will realize that usually the same group of people show up. Then you build up your relationship. I would say that's probably the best one. And also connect to your society, because eventually if you do not have that connection, because your case eventually will go to one of the 48 society councils for evaluation at the first step. If you don't have any connection, then I would say then you should actually, that's a void you should fill. Yeah, you should fill.
Yeah, and I will also drop in the chat the link to the IEEE Fellows page. It has the follow committee and some follow members featuring or spotlighting some follow members. Try to connect with them, and also, as Don recommended, find people in your local section or your local region. That would be
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah.
Is there an email for people to send you questions if they have
I
questions?
think there's one, I think it's fellows at IEEE.org, I think. Then the fellow staff will pick up, yes.
All right. I'll grab
Or you
that.
can talk to Jennifer or Gaida and make sure that's correct.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just let me add, just go back to the previous question. Yeah, for the references, the nominator, it doesn't have to be coming from your local area. You can say, for instance, I'm from Africa, but locally, I don't have a single fellow. But I know this particular person, he actually originally from, Africa, but now he works in, United States, Canada, or whatever, or Europe, somewhere, and he is a fellow, or he or she is a fellow. Then, of course, then you can contact him. Hey, can you actually potentially do that? Or, hey, am I qualified? Whatever. You can start a conversation there that way. Yeah, you don't have the references doesn't have to come from the same region where you are. No, you don't. You can go all over the world as long as you can find people. Yeah.
And that's for both follow and senior member applications.
Yeah. Senior member is pretty straightforward, I must say. If you're not senior member, you should go, because, for instance, there's no limit on how many. Secondly, say just as long as they meet a minimum qualification. I can see the fellow evaluation committee actually even had one session right before the deadline for the fellow application. So you can see we really work the issue, trying to, people are busy, particularly from industry, they don't have time, they don't know all the details, and all of a sudden they realize, oh, I am short of senior member, accumulative 5 years, then they don't want to join. That kind of stuff, yeah.
Yeah. And we had a previous webinar on senior member elevation done by Howard Wolfman.
How is the knowledge being done? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. That sums it up. We are right on top of the hour. Thank you, Don, so much for making the time and sharing your knowledge. Definitely, I see a lot of people in the chat excited and have a lot of questions. I hope to see you applying for the senior membership and the follow membership elevation. With that, thank you so much, Don. Also, thank you, Mark. Dave, and
Okay.
everyone here who joined us today. And we'll be sharing the presentation and the recording on the IEEE TV channel for Industry Engagement Committee. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye bye.
Bye bye.